Before we can talk, we cry. It's how we survive. So why do we tell boys to stop crying? To harden up? To grow a pair? Well, stuff that. If you feel down, speak up. Because silence can kill. It takes guts to show pain. It takes a man to feel. It takes balls to cry.
I think in Irish society, Irish people are actually quite good at expressing emotions generally. Some are better than others. I think if we're to generalise, we'd say men probably sometimes have more difficulty expressing their emotions, or even often selecting which is the more appropriate emotion for the moment. I think we're getting better at that. Certainly younger people are better at it. But sometimes it's not so much that people can't express emotions, just that we're not often good at reading where they're at. Sometimes men use very subtle cues when they're in difficulty or in distress, or even when they're enjoying something tremendously, they find it difficult to express that. I just think we need to understand that. Having men more expressive, is certainly something that we'd like to see, but in an area that they're comfortable with. So it doesn't completely radically change their personality or their experience of the world. So they're genuine to themselves, they're comfortable with that, and they feel that they have the full range of emotion, and they can express that in comfort. That's really what we'd like to see. I think across all different forms of identity, in terms of we all adopt different identities at different points in our lives, associated with our gender, associated with our roles, associated with our occupations, etc. So people play out different roles, and sometimes these are social masks that people adopt, and sometimes the mask doesn't fit them particularly well at certain times. If we see a woman becoming upset and tearful, we begin to construct a narrative around that in our own minds as to something distressing has happened, she had a loss, what has happened in her life. When we see a man crying, it's actually a more profound phenomenon because it's not something we're associated with in our culture, at least. And it's not that people are told not to cry, although the message of big boys don't cry has been out there for many years. But I think it's just men express their emotions in a very different way, and there is an expectation that men will be strong, will be the safeguarder, and that there will perhaps be a loss of role. But certainly over the last number of years, we're seeing gender roles changing very radically indeed, and much more honesty and authenticity about that. And I'm not sure that we're going to see men breaking down crying in the same way as we don't see women adopting male attributes either, particularly some that may be unhealthy or unsuited to them. So I think these are gender roles that are established very, very early in our development, in our early life, and get reinforced by social cues and by media cues and other messaging. And the other piece then is how people around you might respond to that. You will get very subtle, in fact, sometimes the more subtle a social cue is, the more impactful it is, that it makes people feel uncomfortable. It discourages folk. And I think we do need to become a little bit more emotionally literate. I spoke to a friend recently who had a bereavement, and he was describing how people react in two ways. Either people came forward and asked him how he was, were very open and direct and embraced the conversation. Other people he knew very well and was very close to felt awkward and uncomfortable, and they felt they didn't know the etiquette of how to engage with someone who had a recent close bereavement. So I think we're becoming better at these things, and through life experience and skills, people gain more comfort and ability, and they begin to realise just be yourself, be honest, be open, and your emotions are something that you need to live with. Increasingly, people begin to understand emotions like weather, like an internal weather, and you don't choose the weather in any particular way, but you do navigate your way through it, and you do prepare yourself. And the main useful advice around emotions is try and understand your emotions, understand what's driving them, and allow them to find expression.
I'm living a life of someone who suffers immensely with depression. And this is so hard for me to talk about it, but it's not just me. It's impossible for the millions of other people to talk about it. And that's the problem. That's actually the problem with depression. But what we fear the most isn't the dark place that we're in, or the dark times that we're going to go through, or what we're capable of doing. What we actually fear the most is that our friends won't understand that we'll lose them, that our family won't know what we're going through, or won't get it, that our colleagues will look at us differently, or that we may even lose our jobs. But that's just a stigma we believe exists inside ourselves. And it honestly isn't the case. It's not how society will see it. Last year in Ireland alone, over 550 people died as a cause of depression. That's more than car accidents in Ireland. But yet, we are so aware of drive safe campaigns, of road safety awareness, that our government and governing bodies push onto us, and that's great. But we all need to start talking about depression, and we need to open up. I pushed myself into a dark place, into a dark corner, a corner that only had one way out, and I thought about that way every single day for 10 years. And you shouldn't think like that. But I was alone in my own mind, even though I could never be alone.
I think the huge difficulty is that when a person's confidence begins to drop, they become isolated, they become withdrawn, and then they seem to take on the enormity of all of their problems as a solo. And that's not really a successful way to do that. Humans are designed to operate in a group, in a small tribe, in a family unit, and that's how we best process our feelings and how our needs are met. When people become isolated and alienated, at that point then it becomes very difficult to know who might assist you with a problem, and then you often get to a point where you feel you actually don't deserve help. And that becomes quite a lonely space and a difficult space. The other thing then is that if they wait till they're in a crisis, well then they're in quite a dangerous place. So rather than allowing something to build up, naturally have a channel, have some good mate who you chat to. One good adult for young people is certainly the recommendation. And we know that if people have 3 friends, even people with significant mental health needs, you can reduce your admission rate to hospital by half if you have 3 friends. Now, not everyone's good at making friends, so this is where other models like befriending models and counselling type models can come into the frame.
What is happening to Irish men that so many of us seem to be opting out of life and killing ourselves? It seems to happen from about 35 up to about 55. They seem to be the danger years. So what's happening to us? Why is that?
This is very interesting, Tommy. When you look at Ireland's suicide rate, Ireland's rate of suicide is well below the EU average in men and women, except in one area, which are young men and young women, indeed, between 15 and 24, where we're one of the highest in Europe. So whatever we're doing wrong as a society, we are hopelessly failing our young people rather than our older people. Okay. Now, as a psychiatrist, I don't really know what it is we're doing wrong. I don't know why these young people are killing themselves, but we do need to figure it out.
In relation to the suicide rates in Ireland, across our whole population, across all of life, Ireland actually has a relatively low rate compared with other European countries. However, when it comes to young people and young men in particular, our rate is actually quite high. We're in the top 4 of European suicide rates among younger people. And young men are definitely overrepresented in that space. Over the last number of years, I suppose, with the economic recession, we've seen a radical shift. When unemployment levels rise, there's usually a very close relationship between rising unemployment rates and completed suicide, taking one's own life. So, for example, in most international research would suggest that if the unemployment rate rises by 1%, you can expect to see just less than 1%, 0.79% of an increase in suicide. So in Ireland over the last number of years, in a very short space of time, we went from having an unemployment rate of 4.8, jumped to 15.8. So an 11% lift. And we didn't see an 11% lift in suicide rates, but certainly there was an escalation. And we saw a different profile of people, people in business, people in families, people with financial difficulties, certainly represented in those numbers.
But I just want to know which generation you belong to.
The current one. Okay, all right. I'll describe what my generation is and you'll know. My generation can't afford houses.
Yeah.
My generation can't afford to have children. My generation are either leaving the country or jumping in rivers. That's my generation, man. And my...
I think there's a lot more can be done. I think there was a view in the past that mental health was, if you looked at all the government departments, said, well, that's an issue for health, and it's only health. However, in 2006, the government current mental health policy, Vision for Change, described it quite differently. It said absolutely, there is a core role, a central role for the mental health services, which are a creature of the HSE and the Department of Health, but there needs to be a whole of a government approach. And certainly we're seeing this in the reiteration of the policy for suicide prevention, Connected for Life. And there's a recognition that if people are to enjoy good, healthy lives across their whole lifespan, we need to have really good education, we need to have good housing, we need to have a good clean environment, we need to have employment opportunities. And if you should run into difficulties, absolutely, we need to have accessible, effective health services. If we look at the investment in mental health in Ireland over the last number of years, in the 1960s in Ireland, and bear in mind, Ireland had the highest rate of hospitalisation of any country in the world. No other country had the same rate of psychiatric beds as Ireland. Russia and America were behind us, but significantly behind us. And that was a function of emigration and disadvantage and a whole raft of other features that fed into that. But at one point in Ireland, in the early 1960s, there were 22,000 people living in psychiatric hospitals. So that was just half of 1% of the whole population. No other country came anywhere close to that. And at that time, the mental health service used about 23% of the entire health budget. When I began my career in the 1980s, that number had dropped to 12% of health spending, which is what the WHO would recommend. The World Health Organization figures to have a sustainable, broad-based mental health service, you need to spend about 12% and dedicate that to your mental health services of your health spending. When Vision for Change was published, that number had dropped to 7%. And during the recessionary period, because of retirements and other changes within the staff demographic, that number dropped to about 5.5%. So when our population had the greatest need for mental health services, the services were underdeveloped and struggling to perform and actually to continue services. Nonetheless, at that time there was a considerable rebalancing of how the services operate, moving further away from bed-based services and hospital-based services into the community, and a rapid development of services for children and adolescents. Ireland was really poorly provided for up to about 2006, and since then there's been significant change. There is still a lot more work to do, and the big challenge for the mental health services is to find the professional staff groups and the skill sets from psychiatrists, psychologists, OTs, speech and language therapists, social workers and mental health nurses. And certainly there's some encouraging signs now, but that will be a challenge into the future, to making sure that we have the professional skill sets so that people can have ready access and timely access to mental health services when they need them. I still think though that people's identity will cause them to behave in different ways, and that is a healthy, well-balanced society where people have the full range of roles, etc., that they would wish to play out, but not to the point where that emotional uniform doesn't fit them any longer, or where they become stifled in some way. So I think certainly in Mental Health Ireland we're trying to encourage people to be real, be honest and be authentic, be yourself and enjoy being yourself.
Didn't ask you why. What could I say?